Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Endurance Collective podcast. Welcome to 2026. And man, we're excited to be here today and to have the opportunity just to bring you an update from us. And with me today, obviously, if you're watching, you see her next to me. If you're listening, I have with me my wife, Courtney Garcia.
Present.
Present. There it is.
We're still here in 2026. We made it, guys.
We made it. And man, we are just excited, but also ready, I think, to give those who have waited now for a little bit, and we'll get into that a little bit today as well, to hear from us, but just to share with you just our hearts and what we've been going through in this season of our lives, and obviously how you can be a part here in the near future. So exciting stuff today that we wanted to give an update on and just share. We hear from many of you throughout life, whether it be through phone calls, text messages, or just running into you and encountering you around. It's always a blessing to catch up with those that we've had the opportunity to serve with, to do ministry with, and then just to do life with. And so really that's all this is today. It's an opportunity for us to continue to share what God has been doing in our lives and where He's taking us in this next season. And that kind of leads us into where again, this is just us talking.
A little more casual. Really, I feel like we're a little rusty.
We were talking and just sharing along this concept. And it's like we really just need to record this and share this and share kind of our thought process and what God has taken us and leading us through. And we started talking about this, and it reminds me of last year because our first episode of last year, I actually sat down with my good friend, John Schroeder. Many of you might know him. If you haven't listened to episode 1 of season 2, you'll hear him. We recorded a live podcast. We talked about spiritual disciplines and different ways that we as Christians can develop habits that lead to lasting habits and results. Yeah. And so we were kind of talking about that, right? I feel like everyone does. Number one, when you turn the page to a new year, we just made it out of the first month of the year. We're heading into
It's already February, guys.
I know, it's crazy. But we were talking about that concept, right? That everyone always talks about this whole new year, new me. Yeah. We set goals. We do all kinds of things. We pray and we fast. We do many of things as a church, and many of us do things individually, whether it be making healthier choices, committing to spiritual habits, like just mentioned, but. At the same time, there's
a cliche to it.
There is a cliche to it, and that's kind of where our conversation started. And I guess you want to share more about that, just concept in general.
Yeah, I just remember kind of sitting there thinking about the podcast and like, what could we do to talk with people and how, because you think, how do we relate? How can people know that we're walking the same path you are? And, we live the same struggles that you do. And, that's what I was thinking, new year, new me. And then I was like, you know what? Like, it's just not realistic in a sense, because we have that cliche of like that we're going to just, it's a new year, so let's start now. Let's do this now. And I was sitting there thinking about kind of talking about like big changes versus small changes and kind of normalizing quitting in a way that we tend to get, my goal already was we kept saying we were going to get a podcast out. Like we need to get a podcast going. We need to get a podcast going. And then I got my notification for our homeowners were due. And I'm like, it's the 31st of January. What do you mean? It's already time to go right on into February. And I'm like, well, not necessarily we, but me, that one of the goals is let's get a podcast out January, and it's already it's February. So in a sense, kind of saying it is new year, new me, but with the difference of instead of constantly trying to vertically jump on these big, huge leaps, if we're going to do this and we're going to do that, normalize I already missed my own deadline. Yeah. And it's the beginning of the year still,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think kind of what you're talking about, though, for us is realizing that, when you set goals, not even in life and also from a spiritual sense, it's just setting goals that, like you talked about. I think what you're hitting on is good, because you're talking about vertical goals, but really vertical goals, I think, at least what I understand it as, is setting goals that are unattainable,
Oh, yeah.
that are out
Yeah.
of reach, that are nearly a 180 from where you're currently at.
Yeah.
And obviously that's many of times that's where we want to go, right? We're headed in the wrong direction. We want to turn and go a different direction,
Yeah.
to find different results, and that's great. But oftentimes, I think it's really about focusing in on, like you talked about, making those small changes in our lives so that we can obtain those goals. And I think that's where we've been recently, in our own lives.
Yeah.
And through the collective, is just not being in a hurry. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, not being in a hurry. We've also talked about the time. I know that we've had those conversations, and it's so funny because we always, especially when people talk about the second coming of Christ, or people talk about
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
different things, right? They'll always say, "Oh, well, God's timing is different than ours," or you talk about patience, right? God's timing is different
Yeah.
than ours, but for some reason, oftentimes, like, that only gets applied to certain scenarios in our Christian walk.
Yeah.
And for me, I've been learning to embrace that more in this season, because it's like I want it now. Like, the goals that I'm setting, it's like, I don't want to set these lofty goals. I want to set goals that are obtainable, but also I want to live in the present and understand that, that it truly is all in God's timing, and that, it might be a year, it might be
Yeah.
2 years before we see the next season, if you would,
Yeah.
of what God is calling us to. But there's a beauty in the waiting, and I think it's more or less about preparation,
Yeah.
and what you do in that season,
Yeah.
that allows you to see those small wins, that ultimately develop disciplines and develop you, and bring you closer to God.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the thing, is that, like, a lot of us do have the disciplines. We've proven to ourselves that we do have the disciplines, but it's just the way we're aiming with those disciplines, like you said. And so, like, that kind of vertical goals, it's that I'm going to do this every single day, and I'm going to do this every single day, and I'm going to meal prep, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. Like, I was thinking about that because I was trying to figure out how to think about what that meant to me, vertical goals versus lateral goals.
Yeah.
So vertical goals to me is this drastic identity overhaul. And then lateral moves are these adjacent realistic shifts. So, for example, one thing I was thinking of is, like, I'm always, like, trying to do something health, or I'm always on the next trend of what's out there, what's on my reels, what's on my TikToks, what am I doom scrolling on? Like, lately, I'll just get in the habits of things. And one thing is, like, I remember in December, I was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to buy all this new glass, BCPC free, all this stuff, glass Tupperware. I'm going to meal prep, and we're gonna eat. We're gonna meal prep every single Sunday, and we're gonna have all this stuff, and it's gonna be. And in a way, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna meal prep, and we're gonna make all these things happen. We're gonna make these life adjustments, and it's gonna be healthy. And in that, my goal was, we're gonna meal prep every week, and then that way it'll be easier, right? It'll be easier because we'll know what's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for all of us, right?
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, that's a huge identity shift. I mean, it's not just meal prepping every week on Sunday. It's, what are we going to eat 7 days in a row that we're going to like, number one? Like, number two, is the store always going to have that stocked? Well, that means that I've got to always make sure that, number one, that I've got the pantry stocked. I've got the fridge stocked with everything I need. Well, the fridge really needs to be cleaned out. So I need to, like, clean out the fridge and get that all nice and tidy. Well, I probably should buy some more organizing things for that first. And then it's the same thing with the pantry. It's like, it just, I think it becomes so overwhelming. It's not like we can't have those goals, but it's like, how do you get to, because we say how simple it might be. Oh, let me just meal prep every Sunday, and then I'm going to have all my meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner throughout the week. And that's what's going to keep me sane. That's what's going to keep me healthy. And that's what's going to, transform my journey of health and, get fit, all the things. But it's like, there's so many thousands of steps before that. Like, the way you could see of reaching that vertical goal is start off laterally. And like how we've kind of, to bring it all together, it's like, okay, step one, what do we like to eat that we don't mind eating 7 times a week,
Yeah.
or I mean, even 5 times a week, even if you're just like, oh, just Monday through Friday. Okay, 5 times a week. What's 5 meals that we don't mind eating 5 times in a row?
Yeah.
Or just something small like, let me just keep my refrigerator organized for a week, or let me keep my pantry organized for a week. So it's like we said, that those little adjacent realistic shifts. And so I think even, spiritually, we think about that, kind of bringing it all back around to endurance and in our own personal lives. It's like, instead of, we tend to say the whole like, oh, I'm going to read my Bible every single morning for an hour, and I'm just going to do it for 1 hour. I can give 1 hour to God every single day. Most of us don't give 1 hour to ourselves in that sense every single day. And so it's like, every single day, I'm going to read the verse of the day. That's a more realistic adjacent shift to keep things rolling, moving, to create a better habit. Because it's like, we know how to be disciplined in a way, right? But it's about making things part of your everyday life. And so I think that that's kind of something going along the lines of all that. Kind of went off on a tangent there, but I feel like it just helps bring it all full circle of, instead of like new year, new me, it's like, it's a new year. It is still the same me, but I'm going to do little things that I can do along the way to help shift my perspective, a little bit of an adjacent, like a pivot almost, so that I can continue making small steps to pivot to that 180. It's not about like, whew, okay, we're all skinny now and everything's perfect.
Yeah.
It's like, and we're all working out 17 hours a day. Like, no, it's like, okay, I'm going to make little small pivots until I reach that 180. And I think that that's even in the life of endurance, like this whole year, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more, like, sometimes I feel like, or me at least, I would feel like I was beating myself up a little bit on like, man, maybe we didn't do this as much or this as much or this big or that big. And it's like, it always doesn't have to be this huge, big, oh, we're going to, reach millions and billions and thousands, and we're going to have a podcast every single week. And it's just these little pivots. So if you want to kind of talk a little bit more about those like little pivots that we've been trying to make as a collective to bring more content.
I think that's what we've been learning in this season, just sharing. Like I said, this is kind of laid back and just sharing our hearts, and what we've been walking through is that this season has been developing and looking for ways to provide content and to help people be more disciplined in their faith walk, right?
Yeah.
Like through the verse of the day, even that you can find, and it goes straight to our website. You can get it on social. We're sharing it a lot of times in different places to encourage people, right? To like open the Bible, like read a verse, allow the Holy Spirit to work through a verse and capture your heart to continue reading, right?
Yeah.
And so there's different ways that we've been looking to work and develop content again, and also find new ways that we can really develop those things. But for us though, like personally on a personal level, I think we've been going through a lot of
We
things.
have with
We've
our
been
house and
going
everything.
through, I mean repairs, but also
Don't get me started, guys.
also
3-month repair.
3 months.
We won't get
repair.
on that tangent,
Yeah,
but bottom line, had a pipe burst. So
We've been dealing
figure out
with
the
some
rest
stuff.
with insurance.
But
and everything else.
it's been a minute. But the other thing with the house is just kind of preparing for a season of transition.
Yes.
And so we're getting ready to make some moves and to sell our home and do some different things in life, and it's just making sure that where we are supposed to be. And honestly, it reminds me of when we went to actually start Endurance Church.
Yeah.
And, we sat down and we had some conversations, and, not to give too much detail, but we sat down and we had a conversation, and I told you we need to do 3 things before we start. And it's like, we're in another season of preparation and another time of like, get these things done so that you are prepared for what is to come.
Yeah.
And, that's where we've been over really, I mean, it feels like the last year and a half now of just preparing, staying present and staying in God's presence, and just being prepared and being ready. It reminds me of the story. Actually, the kids were reading the story of David and Goliath, of course, and they were talking about the 5 stones that David took, and it reminded me of there's a lot of different ways that you can view that, right? Some will say that he grabbed one for representing his brothers and plus Goliath. There's some different theories, and then some say that he didn't trust God because he grabbed additional. But for me, I see it as a way of David preparing. Right? He had lived and had been a shepherd. He had literally taken on beast and protected what God had given him to care for.
Yeah.
And I've got to imagine that sometimes you need more than one stone, and so. He didn't know in the moment that all it was going to take was one stone.
Right.
But what he did know is that he had to be prepared.
That's right.
And so for us in this season, right, like I feel like it's been a season of, number one, transition, but number two, of just preparation and being ready, developing content, thinking actively about the future and how God would desire to continue to use Endurance Collective and obviously us and our family in the future. So
it's like creating that sustainable obedience and creating those moments to build like capacity building. And I feel like as well, like with what you're talking about with scripture, this just emphasizes faithfulness, endurance, and how we keep going and like you said, like talking about preparing and creating that space. And I think that's what a lot of us sometimes lack in a way is the preparation part of it. And I think that's those little lateral things that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I mean, just some things that I had jotted down too is like, it's not always, even like in these lateral shifts and in us trying to create capacity and create space, and for endurance as well, it's not always about chasing more. It's creating margin, making space for the obedience to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, that was one of the things that, that I learned early on, especially in the context of worship, is like really, really our job in leading people and especially leading people into the presence of God is just creating space for it.
Creating space.
And it's a lost art. It's a lost art in the church where people fail to create space for God to move and for God to fill. And you have to be able to do that. And so, that's kind of where I love what you're saying, because I think it's so true for, like I said, in the context of worship, but also in our daily lives, like going back to what you were saying, just creating space for God to fill those moments in your everyday walk that draw you closer. And as you create space, that space gets bigger. And
it's true.
God continues to fill. I mean, He's faithful, right? Like, there's no question that if you create space in your life, that God won't fill it. Like, every single time. You have people like, well, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to grow closer to God in this area or that area. Well, let me create space and come and tell me in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years from now, how much closer you are to God for creating a space for Him to work and move in your life.
Yeah.
Because He's faithful to do it.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of where I feel like we have been, kind of going back to what you were talking about, having endurance and perseverance.
Yeah. And creating that space, like I feel like is again what we've been kind of what we're really trying to drive home here. Yeah. Creating that space looks like taking small steps, those little things, those little pivots. It's instead of I'm going to go from here to here, from way down here to way up here, it's allowing the moments to like build yourself up into that. And, that's actually something that, that I was looking at too, and I was reading, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so true. It was, I saw something that said endurance isn't loud. In other words, it's quiet. Endurance, I think for us, even, in our history of endurance, like there's been a lot of loud moments for the collective, for endurance just in general as a ministry, but true endurance, and whenever you even put this into your own personal life, it's not loud. True endurance, it's quiet, it's load bearing. endurance is something that you have to, and what you talk about making space, that allows the space to keep pivoting. To that way, also you're doing things with direction. You're walking and you're pivoting, and then that way you can see a little bit more. You're using a little bit more peripheral vision, if you will. Metaphorically, you're using peripheral vision as you're pivoting to make sure you're not just going from, one big, huge leap. I'm going to do this to this. It's like, I'm going to do a little bit of this. And then giving God a time to move within that space in those little adjustments. And I think that, instead of thinking, we kind of had this whole perspective shift. I feel like just in the last couple of weeks or so, just talking about this, it's been like, instead of like these big, huge leaps, like we kind of, you all think, and everybody has those wishful thinkings at times, but it's like, what? Trusting and knowing that God is right here. It's like, what? Make intentional moves, small pivots, so that there is space to fill.
Yeah.
And so that way, like I said, again, kind of going back to this, is that endurance, and in your own life, perseverance and endurance should not look loud. It is a long process. It is, like I said, again, it is load bearing. Endurance is load bearing. And that is creating a solid foundation within the small shifts and those small movements. And I think that's what we're trying to create here. And if you want to, I know we're we're already a few minutes in here, but if you want to kind of talk a little bit more about the way that we also plan on doing this throughout this year, like some things that we want to kind of do as little small pivots, our little goals.
Yeah. There's some that I think that
everyone probably knows already, but we're trying.
Well, no, I think that, we've already kind of talked about some of the content we're trying to create, right? Like, just providing more content that people can engage with on a daily basis, so that ultimately their faith is grown in that area. But we also are going to continue doing events. And again, I get texts and calls all the time, and I love it.
I do too. I'm like, oh wow, they haven't forgotten about us.
Yeah. Well, I love.
We haven't forgotten about us.
No, well, I love the fact that people want that they desire that, and that they want to be able to gather, and they want to be able to just worship in spirit and in truth. And so, that's obviously something that we're going to keep doing. We're planning an event right now for March. So anybody out there, if you're interested, it's coming soon. But there's other things too that I've been looking at doing and providing content. And then I would say the other thing that I want to do this year is just be open and transparent and kind of what you're talking about, just like we're having a conversation now and sharing what God has been doing in our lives and teaching us as we, live out endurance and learn to persevere.